Hello, friends. Before we dive into today's story, please help me grow this channel by subscribing, sharing this video with others, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now, let's get started with our story. My brothers were still laughing when I opened Grandma Eleanor's diary to a page that made my blood run cold. While they celebrated their private island and gold vault, I discovered why she really left me just this old leather book, and why our family fortune was built on blood. My name is Wesley Whitmore, and I'm about to tell you how a single diary destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. I'm 34 years old, and I teach history at Lincoln High School in Boston. Not exactly the career path expected from a Whitmore heir, but then again, I was never really an heir, was I? That title belonged to my older brothers. Garrett and Donovan Garrett, at 38, runs his own investment firm and speaks 3 languages, though he only uses them to close deals that destroy small companies. Donovan, 36, owns 5 luxury car dealerships across New England, and once spent $100,000 on a watch just to prove he could. They got Grandma Eleanor's millions. I got her diary. But here's what they didn't know when they were popping champagne and calling their yacht brokers. Grandma Eleanor Whitmore, the woman who built a chemical empire worth billions, who had senators on speed dial, who donated wings to hospitals like she was buying coffee, had been planning this moment for 50 years. She knew exactly what she was doing when she left me that worn leather diary with its faded gold lettering, Quishiu. Knew I'd find the pages she'd sealed together. She knew I'd discover what she wrote in trembling handwriting on paper that smelled like guilt and old perfume. The truth is, my brothers thought they'd won the lottery that day in the lawyer's office. They thought Grandma had finally shown them what they were worth. Millions in real estate, gold and toys for the ultra-rich. They never questioned why the woman who raised us on stories of honor and integrity would leave her fortune to 2 men who stepped on others to climb higher. They never wondered why she looked at me differently during those last months, why she held my hand longer, why she whispered, "I'm sorry," when she thought I was asleep during my final visit. Standing in that mahogany-paneled study, surrounded by 3 generations of Whitmore portraits, I watched my brothers high-five each other like they'd just won the Super Bowl. Garrett's wife, Vivian, was already on her phone with an interior designer, planning to gut the Manhattan penthouse. Donovan's wife, Relly, was Googling how to throw a party on a private island right there in the lawyer's office. My mother, Patricia, sat quietly in the corner, her face unreadable. My father, Roland, stood by the window, his construction-weathered hands clasped behind his back, not looking at anyone. And then there was me, holding a diary that felt heavier than it should, like it contained more than just pages and ink. The lawyer, Mr. Peaton, had read my inheritance last, almost as an afterthought. To my grandson, Wesley, I leave my personal diary and the burden of truth it contains. That word, burden, should have been my first warning. Grandma Eleanor never chose words carelessly. But at that moment, all I heard was my brother's laughter, not just quiet chuckles, but full-bodied, bent-over, tears in their eyes laughter, the kind that echoes off wood paneling and makes everyone else in the room uncomfortable, the kind that's meant to humiliate. And it worked. For about 10 seconds, it worked perfectly. Then I opened the diary. The first page was dated 60 years ago, back when Grandma was just Eleanor Fitzgerald, a secretary at a chemical plant who wore the same dress 3 days a week to save money. But I didn't start there. Something made me flip to the middle, to a section where the pages looked different, where the edges were darker, like they'd been touched by fingers that couldn't stop returning to the same words. And there it was, 20 pages sealed together with adhesive so old it had turned amber, like prehistoric tree sap, preserving something that was never meant to see daylight again. My brothers were still laughing when I ran my finger along those sealed edges. They were still celebrating when I noticed the writing that bled through from the other side. Words that shouldn't exist in my grandmother's carefully curated history. Words like forgery and asylum and murder. Garrett was describing his plans for the gold vault, how he'd install a biometric security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. Donovan was already naming his yacht something ridiculous in Italian. Neither of them noticed when I excused myself to the bathroom, diary clutched against my chest like armor. Neither of them saw my hand shaking as I held those sealed pages up to the light, trying to read the secrets trapped between them. This is the story of how I discovered that every dollar my family owned was stolen. This is the story of how my grandmother's diary revealed a crime that built an empire. This is the story of how the grandson who got nothing inherited the power to destroy everything. And it all started with a single question written in my grandmother's perfect penmanship on the page just before the sealed section. Can a fortune built on evil ever be made clean? The answer would cost me my brothers, divide my family, and force me to choose between wealth and truth. But first, I had to decide whether to break the seal that Grandma Eleanor had created, the one that held back 50 years of guilt. My brothers thought they'd inherited the Whitmore fortune. What I inherited was the truth about where it came from, and sometimes the truth is worth more than all the gold vaults and private islands in the world. Sometimes the truth is the only thing worth inheriting at all. The Whitmore estate sat on 40 acres of pristine Massachusetts countryside, the kind of property that had its own name on Google Maps, Thornfield Manor. We just called it Grandma's house when we were kids. That morning, October 15th, the maple trees surrounding the estate were showing off in brilliant reds and golds, like nature itself was celebrating Eleanor Whitmore's final distribution of wealth. I parked my 10-year-old Honda Civic between Garrett's new Tesla and Donovan's Lamborghini, the automotive equivalent of a visual joke about our respective places in the family hierarchy. The gravel crunched under my feet as I walked toward the main entrance, each step taking me back to summers spent here when Grandma would teach me chess while my brothers counted the antiques and tried to guess their worth. Wesley, my mother, Patricia, called from the doorway, her voice carrying that particular tone of sympathy she'd perfected over the years. I'm glad you came. Of course I came. Mom, she was my grandmother too. Patricia hugged me, whispering, just remember, whatever happens today, you're worth more than money. It was a nice sentiment, one she'd repeated throughout my childhood whenever Garrett got a new car for his birthday, or Donovan received another trust fund payment. But standing in that foyer, surrounded by oil paintings worth more than I'd make in a lifetime, the words felt hollow. The study hadn't changed since I was 8 years old. Same Persian rug that Donovan once spilled wine on during Thanksgiving, causing a family crisis. Same floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with first editions that Garrett tried to sell online when he was 16. Same leather chairs that had hosted 3 generations of Whitmore family meetings, most of which ended with someone storming out. Roland, my father, stood by the window overlooking the gardens. He'd built half the commercial properties in Boston with his construction company, but in this room he always looked out of place. He'd married into the Whitmores, and despite 39 years of marriage, he still acted like a guest in their world. Dad, I said, approaching him. Wesley? He nodded without turning. Your brothers are already discussing liquidation options. The will hasn't even been read yet. Since when has that stopped them? Garrett's voice boomed across the room before I could respond. There he is, the professor. He always called me that. Even though I taught high school. Thought you might skip this one considering. Considering what? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. Well, you did turn down Grandma's offer to pay for law school and business school and that MBA program at Wharton. He counted on his fingers, theatrically. Pretty sure you forfeited your inheritance, right? Somewhere around rejection number 3. Donovan laughed from his position by the fireplace, where he was examining a Ming vase like he was already cataloging his share. Remember when Wesley said he wanted to make a difference instead of making money? Grandma's face was priceless. Actually, I said, she told me she was proud of me for following my convictions. Sure she did, Donovan smirked. That's why she visited your apartment exactly once. The truth was, Grandma Eleanor visited me every month. She'd come to my school, sit in the back of my classroom, and watch me teach the Industrial Revolution or the Great Depression. Afterward, we'd get coffee at a shop nobody from our family would ever frequent, and she'd tell me stories about her early days, before the money, before the empire, before she became Eleanor Whitmore. Your grandmother saw something in you, she'd said during our last coffee meeting, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted her cup. Something I lost a long time ago. What's that, Grandma? The ability to choose correctly when it matters. I hadn't understood then. But sitting in that study, watching my brothers circle like vultures, I was beginning to. Mr. Peaton arrived precisely at 2:00, his briefcase containing documents that would reshape our family forever. He was old school, the kind of lawyer who still wore a pocket watch and called everyone by their formal titles. He'd handled Whitmore family business for 40 years, and his face gave away nothing as he arranged papers on the desk. "Shall we begin?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Vivian and Rella took their positions behind their husbands like a choreographed move they'd practiced. My mother sat beside my father, their shoulders not quite touching. Uncle Taryn, Grandma's younger brother, occupied a chair in the corner, his expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The last will and testament of Eleanor Fitzgerald Whitmore," Peaton began, his voice carrying the weight of ceremony. "Dated September 1st of this year, just 6 weeks ago. She changed her will 6 weeks ago, right after our last coffee meeting. To my son Roland Whitmore and his wife Patricia, I leave the house in Martha's Vineyard and an annual income of $200,000 for life." My parents exhaled simultaneously, comfortable but not extravagant, typical grandma. "To my brother Taryn, I leave my collection of rare books in the cottage in Vermont." Taryn nodded slightly, unsurprised. "To my grandson Garrett Whitmore, I leave the Manhattan penthouse valued at $8 million and the contents of the Zurich gold vault containing 500 bars of pure gold." Garrett's fist pump was barely contained. Vivian was already texting someone, probably her personal shopper. "To my grandson Donovan Whitmore, I leave the private island off Martha's Vineyard, known as Whitmore Key, and the yacht Eleanor's Dream, valued at $12 million. Donovan actually whooped. "The island, babe, we got the island." Rel kissed him dramatically. And I felt my stomach turn. Not from jealousy exactly, but from something else. Something about the way Grandma had structured this, giving them exactly what they'd always wanted. "To my grandson Wesley Whitmore," Peaton continued, and the room fell silent. Even my brothers stopped celebrating to lean in. "I leave my personal diary and the burden of truth it contains." The silence stretched. Peaton looked up from the papers, waiting. Everyone was waiting. "That's it?" Garrett finally asked. "A diary?" Peaton cleared his throat. "There is an addendum. Mrs. Whitmore wanted me to read this personally." He pulled out a sealed envelope, broke it open, and read, "Wesley, you alone have the eyes to see and the heart to act. The others have received what they value most. You have received what I valued most. The choice of what to do with it is yours alone." My brother's laughter started as a chuckle and built to something almost hysterical. But I was looking at Uncle Taryn, who was staring at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He knew something, and somewhere in the diary that Peaton was now handing me, that something was waiting to destroy everything my family thought they knew about their fortune. The reception afterward was held in the estate's grand ballroom, where Grandma had once hosted senators and CEOs. Now it hosted my brother's victory celebration. Garrett had already called his banker to discuss liquidating the gold, while Donovan was on FaceTime with a yacht broker, walking him through the vessel's specifications. The other relatives and family friends who'd come to pay respects watched this display with varying degrees of disgust and resignation. "Shameless," Aunt Catherine muttered, passing me with a plate of untouched food. "Your grandmother's barely in the ground." But that was Garrett and Donovan. They'd been calculating their inheritance since we were teenagers, making spreadsheets of Grandma's assets, arguing over who deserved what based on some complex point system they devised involving birthday visits and phone calls. I stood by the French doors, holding the diary like it might evaporate if I set it down. The leather was soft from decades of handling, and it smelled like Grandma's lavender hand cream. The weight of it seemed wrong somehow, too heavy for its size, as if the words inside had physical mass. "Wesley." Uncle Taryn appeared beside me, his voice low. "We need to talk." He guided me onto the terrace, away from the noise. The October air was sharp, clearing my head from the suffocating atmosphere inside. "Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing," he said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "That diary isn't just memories and musings." "What do you mean?" He took a long drag, staring at the horizon. Eleanor carried guilt her entire life. Something happened in 1974 that changed everything. changed her, changed how the family fortune was built. Why are you telling me this? Because she chose you for a reason. Out of everyone in this family, she believed you were the only one who would do the right thing when you learned the truth. Before I could ask more, Donovan's voice boomed from the doorway. There's our favorite teacher. Come on, Wesley, I'm buying everyone drinks at the club. Oh, wait, you probably can't afford the membership fee. I'll pass, I said. Your loss. Hey, when I throw my first party on the island, I might let you camp on the beach. You can grade papers by bonfire light. Garrett joined him, champagne glass in hand. Actually, Donovan, we should buy Wesley something nice with our inheritance. What do teachers need, red pens? Maybe a new cardigan? How about some respect? The words came out before I could stop them. Garrett's smile sharpened. Respect? You gave up respect when you chose poverty over power. Grandma offered you everything and you threw it back in her face to play schoolteacher. At least I earned what I have. Earned? Donovan laughed. You make in a year what I spend on a weekend. Face it, Wesley, you're a Whitmore in name only. They left me on the terrace, their laughter echoing back through the doors. Uncle Taryn crushed his cigarette under his heel. Read the diary, Wesley. Start with 1974. And whatever you find, remember that Eleanor trusted you with it for a reason. That night, in my cramped apartment above the Pakistani restaurant, I sat at my kitchen table with the diary open before me. My girlfriend, Nyan, had come over with Chinese takeout. But the food sat untouched as I turned the pages. The early entries painted a picture of a young woman with boundless ambition. Eleanor Fitzgerald, secretary at Whitmore Chemicals, catching the eye of Cornelius Whitmore, the owner's son. Their whirlwind romance, the struggle to be accepted by his wealthy family. The slow climb from secretary to secretary's wife to partner to CEO after Cornelius died in 1975. But as I reached 1974, the tone changed. The entries became sporadic, fragmented. Then I found it. March 15, 1974. Cornelius came home tonight covered in something dark. He said it was oil from the car, but I saw him burning his clothes in the garden. He's been meeting with lawyers all week. Something about Simon Kellerman and the patent. I'm afraid to ask. Simon Kellerman. The name meant nothing to me, but Eleanor had underlined it 3 times. The next entry was dated a week later. Simon is gone. Cornelius says he was unstable, that he had to be committed for everyone's safety. But I met Simon. He was brilliant, yes, but not insane. His daughter Anita came to the house crying, begging to know where her father was. Cornelius had security remove her. I've never seen him so cold. Then came the sealed pages. 20 pages glued together with adhesive so old it had turned amber. I could see writing through the paper. Dense paragraphs in Eleanor's hand, but I couldn't make out the words except for fragments. Forgery, stolen formulas, asylum, murder. My phone rang. It was my mother. Wesley, stop reading that diary. How did you know I was reading it? Because I know you and I know what's in there. Or at least enough. Your grandmother made us all promise never to speak of it. Speak of what, Mom? A long pause. The real foundation of the Whitmore fortune. Wesley, some secrets should die with their keepers. Is that why she gave it to me? To keep the secret? No, my mother said quietly. She gave it to you because you're the only one with the courage to expose it. But Wesley, if you do, you'll destroy everything. Your brother's inheritance, your father's business connections, the family name, everything. Maybe it deserves to be destroyed. Maybe. But are you prepared to be the one who lights the match? After she hung up, I sat staring at those sealed pages. On the last visible page before the seal, Eleanor had written, "Tomorrow I must choose between my soul and my family's future. God forgive me for what I'm about to do." Nayan found me there at 3 a.m., still staring at the diary. "Wesley, you're scaring me. What's in that thing?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But I think it's the real reason Grandma left billions to my brothers and this diary to me. Maybe you shouldn't find out. Would you be able to leave it alone, knowing that 20 pages of truth are hidden right here, and all you have to do is break a seal that's already falling apart?" She squeezed my hand. "No, but I also know that some boxes, once opened, can never be closed again." I picked up the diary and held it to the light again. Through the amber adhesive, I could make out one complete sentence that made my blood run cold. Cornelius had Simon Kellerman murdered and made it look like Suicide. My inheritance wasn't just a diary. It was evidence of a crime that built an empire, and now I had to decide what to do with it. 3 days passed. Before I made my decision, 3 days of staring at those sealed pages, of my brothers sending photos from their new properties, of my mother calling to check if I'd done anything rash. 3 days of teaching my students about the robber barons of the Gilded Age while carrying the weight of knowing I was descended from one. The breaking point came during my American history class. I was teaching about patent theft in the Industrial Revolution when Marcus, one of my brightest students, raised his hand. "Mr. Whitmore, didn't your family make their money in chemicals?" "My dad says the Whitmores own like half of Boston. They own significant real estate, yes," I said carefully. "So are they robber barons too?" The question hung in the air. 22 teenagers stared at me, waiting for an answer I couldn't give, not yet. That evening, I gathered my supplies. A thin palette knife from my artist neighbor, a hairdryer, wax paper, and patience. I'd learned document preservation techniques during a summer internship at the Boston Library, never imagining I'd use them to uncover my family's crimes. Nain watched from the couch as I worked at the kitchen table. "You sure about this? The seal is already degrading. Look, the edges are lifting here and here. Whatever Grandma used wasn't meant to last forever. I think she wanted someone to open it eventually. Or maybe she sealed it hoping no one would. Then why mention it in the will? Why make sure Peyton read that part about the burden of truth? She could have destroyed this diary years ago." The first page came free at 9:47 p.m. My hands trembled as I read Eleanor's confession in full. March 22, 1974. "I know now what Cornelius has done. Simon Kellerman is dead. The asylum called it suicide, but I found the payment records in Cornelius's safe. $50,000 to Dr. Howard Mansfield the day before Simon died. Another $100,000 to the asylum director the day after. I kept working, each page revealing more of the horror. Simon Kellerman had been Cornelius's partner, a brilliant chemist who developed revolutionary formulas for industrial solvents that would become the foundation of Whitmore Chemicals. Success. But Cornelius wanted everything for himself. He forged commitment papers, Eleanor wrote, had 2 doctors declare Simon insane, claimed he was dangerous. Simon's wife had died 2 years before, leaving only 15-year-old Anita to fight for him. A child against the Whitmore machine. She never stood a chance. Page by page, the truth emerged. Cornelius had stolen 17 patents, each worth millions. He'd destroyed Simon's laboratory notebooks, bribed officials, and built an empire on theft and murder. And Eleanor had discovered it all 1 week too late to save Simon. "I confronted Cornelius tonight," one entry read. He didn't deny it. He said Simon was weak, that he would have wasted the formulas on cheap licensing deals instead of building something grand. He said the world needed leaders willing to make hard choices. I told him he was a murderer. He said I was naive. We slept in separate rooms for the first time in our marriage. The most damning evidence came near the end. Photographs of the original patents in Simon's handwriting before Cornelius had forged his own name. Eleanor had hidden them between the pages, pressed flat for 50 years. There were bank records showing the bribes, a copy of the falsified commitment papers, even a suicide note in handwriting that didn't match Simon's. But the real shock came in a letter Eleanor had written but never sent. Dated June 1974. "Dear Anita, I know where your father is buried. The asylum claimed they cremated him, but they lied. Cornelius paid them to bury him in an unmarked grave at Riverside Cemetery, Section 9, Plot 47. I visited once. I left flowers. I wanted to tell you immediately, but Cornelius has threatened to ruin your life if you ever come near our family again. He has judges, police, politicians in his pocket. I'm a coward for not fighting him. But I'm also pregnant with Roland, and I have to think of my child's future. God forgive me. Roland, my father, was born into this blood money, raised on it, built his own business with connections from it. At midnight, I reached the final sealed page. Inside was a Swiss bank account number and a handwritten note dated just 3 months ago. Wesley, my conscience has been my prison for 50 years. I built hospitals and schools and orphanages trying to wash the blood off our money. But philanthropy doesn't resurrect the dead. The account contains 30 million that I've siphoned from the company over decades. It's programmed to release only when someone enters a code at the Zurich branch. Truth, Honor, Justice, 1974. Anita Kellerman is still alive. She lives in Newark, works as a retired librarian. She never married, never had children. She spent her life alone because we destroyed her father when she was just a child. You have 3 choices. 1, keep the money yourself and maintain the family secret. 2, give it all to Anita and maintain the family secret. 3, give her everything, including the truth. I couldn't make the 3rd choice. I was a coward. But you, Wesley, you turned down law school to teach children. You chose meaning over money. You're the only one in this family who might have the courage I lacked. Your brothers will hate you. The family will fracture. But justice delayed is not justice denied. It's justice deferred to someone braver than yourself. I'm sorry to burden you with this, but I'm more sorry that I waited 50 years to create the opportunity for justice. Choose well, my dear one. I set down the final page and looked at Nan, who had been reading over my shoulder for the last hour. Her face was wet with tears. Wesley, this is huge. This isn't just family drama. This is murder, fraud, theft on a massive scale. I know. Your brothers will lose everything if this comes out. The patents will be challenged. The entire company could collapse. I know. So what are you going to do? I looked at the documents spread across my kitchen table. 50 years of evidence waiting for someone with the courage Eleanor never found. I thought about my students, about Marcus asking if my family were robber barons. I thought about Anita Kellerman, 78 years old, still not knowing the truth about her father's death. I'm going to Newark tomorrow, I said. I'm going to meet Anita Kellerman, and then I'm going to give her something my grandmother should have given her 50 years ago. The money. The truth. The money is just numbers in an account. The truth is what was really stolen from her. Nan squeezed my hand. Your family will never forgive you. I looked at the diary, at Eleanor's shaking handwriting, at the weight of secrets she'd carried for half a century. Maybe. But maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe justice is. Tomorrow I would drive to Newark tomorrow. I would knock on Anita Kellerman's door tomorrow. I would begin destroying everything my family had built on Simon Kellerman's bones. Tonight I just sat with the truth, feeling the weight of Eleanor's burden transfer from her conscience to mine. The drive to Newark took 3 hours, but I spent another 30 minutes parked outside Anita Kellerman's building, gathering courage. It was a tired brick complex with rust-stained fire escapes and windows reinforced with bars. This was where Simon Kellerman's daughter had lived for 40 years, while my family lived in mansions built with her father's genius. She answered on the second knock. A small woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun. Her eyes were the same sharp blue as in the photograph Eleanor had hidden in the diary. Anita Kellerman? Yes, if you're selling something, I'm not interested. I'm Wesley Whitmore, Eleanor Whitmore's grandson. The transformation was immediate. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. She tried to slam the door, but I caught it with my hand. Please, I have something you need to see. Something about your father. Your family destroyed my father. Get out before I call the police. I have proof that he was murdered. The words hung between us. She studied my face for a long moment, then stepped aside. Her apartment was small but immaculate, filled with books and photographs. On the mantel sat a picture of a young man in a laboratory coat, smiling beside a teenage girl, Simon and Anita, before everything was stolen. I spread the documents on her coffee table, the patents, the forged commitment papers, the bribe invoices, Eleanor's confession. Anita's hands shook as she picked up each piece, reading in silence for 20 minutes. When she reached Eleanor's unsent letter about the burial plot, she broke. The sob that escaped her was 50 years of grief finally given validation. I sat quietly as she cried, this 78-year-old woman who'd spent a lifetime being told her father was insane. I knew it, she whispered. I always knew Daddy wasn't crazy. He was excited about his formulas, calling them his legacy for me. Then suddenly he was gone, locked away, dead within a month. No one would listen to me. I was just a child. There's more, I said gently, explaining about the Swiss account, the $30 million, the code Eleanor had left. She laughed bitterly. Blood money? Yes, but it's yours if you want it. All of it. And what about the patents? My father's real legacy. That's why I'm here. With this evidence, you can challenge them. Every formula Whitmore Chemicals uses traces back to your father's work. The company would owe you billions in damages. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Newark streets. Do you understand what you're saying? You're destroying your own family. No, my grandfather destroyed my family when he murdered your father. I'm just finally admitting it. That evening, we sat in a law office in downtown Newark. Anita's nephew, Michael, was a patent attorney who'd been fighting corporate theft for 20 years. His eyes widened as he reviewed the documents. This is ironclad, he said. With this evidence, we can prove fraud, theft, and invalidate the patent transfers. Whitmore Chemicals will face criminal investigation. Good, I said. But the real climax came 3 days later at my parents' anniversary dinner. The entire family had gathered at Garrett's new penthouse, a glass palace overlooking Central Park. My brothers were holding court. Garrett explaining his new investment strategies funded by gold sales. Donovan describing the renovations planned for the yacht. They barely acknowledged my arrival. Glad you could make it, my mother said, kissing my cheek. Please, Wesley, whatever you're thinking. Not tonight, but I was already pulling out the diary. I have something everyone needs to hear, I announced. Oh, God, Garrett groaned. Wesley's going to read us poetry from Grandma's diary. How touching, Donovan sneered. Actually, I said, I'm going to read you the truth about where our money came from. I started with Eleanor's confession about Simon Kellerman. The room grew quiet as I read about the forged documents, the bribery, the murder. Donovan tried to interrupt, calling it fiction, but I held up the original patents, the bank records, the evidence. This is ridiculous, Garrett said, but his voice had lost its swagger. Even if it's true, it was 50 years ago. Statute of limitations. Not for murder, I said, and not for patent fraud when there's been continuous profit from it. I've already given copies to Anita Kellerman and her lawyer. My father stood up, his face red. Wesley, stop this immediately. You're destroying everything I've built. Everything your brothers have inherited. Everything built on theft and murder, I corrected. You self-righteous little fool, Garrett spat. You think you're some hero? You're destroying your own family for strangers. Anita Kellerman isn't a stranger. She's a woman who spent 50 years believing her father was insane because our grandfather wanted his formulas. Donovan laughed desperately. So what? You gave her the diary? She can't prove anything from an old woman's guilty conscience. I gave her more than the diary, I said. I gave her the Swiss account. $30 million? Grandma saved for this moment, and I've agreed to testify in court about everything I found. The explosion was immediate. Garrett threw his champagne glass against the wall. Donovan lunged at me, but our father held him back. Vivian and Rel were frantically Googling lawyers on their phones. My mother sat silently, tears streaming down her face. You had no right, Roland said, his voice deadly quiet. That money belonged to the family. No, I said. It belonged to Simon Kellerman. Just like the patents, just like the formulas that built this empire. Grandma knew it. She just couldn't bring herself to return it. But she knew I would. Get out, Garrett said. You're no longer family. You're no longer a Whitmore. I picked up the diary and headed for the door, then turned back one last time. You know what the saddest part is? You're all so angry about losing money that you haven't once asked if it's true. You haven't once wondered about Simon Kellerman or his daughter or the man who was murdered for being brilliant. You just care about your gold vaults and yachts. Uncle Terrence stood up from his corner seat where he'd been silently watching. Wesley's right. Eleanor knew this day would come. She told me before she died that she was leaving the truth to the only one who could handle it. You knew? Patricia gasped. I suspected. Eleanor was my sister. I saw how she changed after Cornelius died. How she threw herself into charity work like she was running from something. Now I know what. I left them there shouting and threatening and blaming each other. In the elevator down, I felt lighter than I had in years. The diary in my hands no longer felt heavy. It felt like freedom. The next morning, the Newark Star-Ledger ran the headline, Whitmore Chemical Empire Built on Murder and Theft. Kellerman Family Files Billion-Dollar Lawsuit. My phone had 47 missed calls from family members. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went to Riverside Cemetery, Section 9, Plot 47, where Simon Kellerman had been hidden for 50 years. Anita was already there. kneeling by a headstone she'd had installed overnight. It read, Simon Kellerman, 1923-1974. Brilliant chemist, loving father, truth finally told. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Thank you for giving me my father back. I thought about Eleanor's words in the diary about choosing correctly when it matters. This was what she meant, not the money or the family name or the inheritance. This moment, standing in a cemetery with a woman who finally knew the truth, was the real inheritance she'd left me. The burden of truth had become the gift of justice, and that was worth more than all the gold my brothers would ever count. 6 months later, I stood in my classroom teaching the same unit on the Gilded Age, but everything had changed. The lawsuit had made national headlines. Chemical giant's dark foundation exposed ran in the Wall Street Journal. Murder, theft, and billions, the Whitmore scandal dominated CNN for a week. My students looked at me differently now, not with the old curiosity about my family's wealth, but with something approaching respect. The legal battle had been swift and brutal. With the evidence I'd provided, Anita's lawyers had filed criminal charges for fraud and civil suits for patent theft. The FBI had opened an investigation into the murder, though everyone involved was long dead. Whitmore Chemical's stock price crashed. Major clients pulled their contracts. Within 3 months, the company was in bankruptcy proceedings. Garrett lost everything. The penthouse had to be sold to pay legal fees. The gold vault was frozen by the courts as evidence of proceeds from criminal activity. He'd called me once, drunk at 2 a.m., screaming that I destroyed his life for nothing. His wife, Vivian, had filed for divorce before the call ended. Donovan fought harder. He tried to claim the island and yacht were separate from the company assets, but forensic accountants traced the purchase money directly to profits from the stolen patents. The last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment in Revere, selling used cars at a dealership that used to be his competitor. Rel had disappeared to California with whatever jewelry she could grab. My father's construction company survived. Barely. He'd built it independently enough from the Whitmore fortune, though many of his society connections evaporated overnight. He hasn't spoken to me since the anniversary dinner. My mother sends texts sometimes, usually just thinking of you, never expecting a response. The surprise was Uncle Taryn. He showed up at my apartment one evening with a bottle of wine and a cardboard box. These are Eleanor's personal letters, he said, the ones that weren't about the business. She'd want you to have them. We sat on my fire escape drinking wine while the sounds of the Pakistani restaurant below drifted up. Do you regret it? He asked. No. Do you think Grandma would have approved? I think Eleanor spent 50 years wishing she had your courage. She told me once that the hardest prison to escape is the one built from your own cowardice. Anita and I met monthly for coffee. An odd friendship born from tragedy and truth. She'd taken the $30 million from the Swiss account but had done something remarkable with it. Half went to mental health, organizations focused on asylum reform. The other half established the Kellerman-Whitmore Foundation for Ethics and Chemistry, providing scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Your grandmother would have liked this, she said one afternoon, turning blood money into opportunity. She would have liked you, I replied. You're doing what she couldn't. Forgiving. Oh, I haven't forgiven Cornelius. But Eleanor was as much a victim as I was in her way, trapped by his crimes, carrying his guilt. At least I got to live my life believing my father was good, even if I thought he was insane. She had to live knowing her husband was evil. The patent case had settled out of court. Anita was awarded $1.8 billion, making her one of the wealthiest women in America overnight. She still lived in the same apartment in Newark, still shopped at the same grocery store, still wore the same comfortable shoes. Money doesn't change who you are, she said. It just amplifies it. Your brothers were always greedy. The inheritance just gave them more to be greedy about. My student Marcus raised his hand during class one day. Mr. Whitmore, was it worth it? Losing your family to tell the truth? I thought about the question carefully. My family lost itself 50 years ago when they chose money over morality. I didn't lose them. I found them out. But you could have kept quiet and inherited some of that money eventually. True, but then I'd have to look at myself in the mirror every morning knowing I was living on stolen genius and murdered dreams. Some prices are too high, Marcus. Your integrity is one of them. After class, I found a note on my desk from the principal. The school board wants to recognize your ethical stance. They're naming the new chemistry lab after Simon Kellerman. That evening, Nan and I walked through Riverside Cemetery. We stopped at Simon's grave, where Anita had installed a bench. Fresh flowers lay on the headstone, probably from Anita's weekly visit. Any regrets? Nan asked, taking my hand. Only one. I wish I could have met him. Simon Kellerman. By all accounts, he was brilliant, kind, devoted to his daughter. He deserved better than being erased for his genius. He got justice, eventually. Through Eleanor, really. She saved that evidence for 50 years, waiting for someone strong enough to use it. We sat on the bench as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber that reminded me of the sealed pages in the diary. Those pages that had hidden truth for so long were now evidence in federal archives, part of the permanent record of American corporate crime. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another reporter, but something made me open it. Wesley, this is Michael, Anita's nephew. She wanted you to know she's establishing a Teaching Excellence Award in your name at your school. She says the only thing more valuable than truth is someone willing to teach it. I smiled, thinking about tomorrow's lesson on the progressive era, about the muckrakers who exposed corruption, about the trustbusters who fought monopolies. I teach it differently now, with the weight of personal experience behind every word. That night, I opened Eleanor's diary one last time. On the final page, after all the confessions and evidence, she'd written one last entry. To whoever reads this, know that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. I was a coward, but I pray my cowardice might inspire someone else's courage. The truth doesn't die. It waits. I closed the diary and placed it on my bookshelf between Howard Zinn and Frederick Douglass. Tomorrow I'd teach. Tomorrow I'd shape young minds to value truth over wealth, integrity over inheritance. Tomorrow I'd continue being the teacher my grandmother wished she could have been, someone who chose correctly when it mattered. The Whitmore fortune was gone, scattered to lawyers and settlements and rightful owners. But the real inheritance Eleanor left me wasn't money or property or even truth. It was the knowledge that doing right is its own reward, that justice delayed can still be justice delivered, and that sometimes the greatest fortune is a clear conscience. My brothers had laughed when they heard I only inherited a diary. They didn't understand that Eleanor had given me the only thing of real value she possessed, the chance to correct a 50-year-old wrong, and in doing so, she'd given me something worth more than all their golden islands combined. She'd given me the freedom that comes from choosing truth. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the real cost of wealth or the value of truth, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear that integrity matters more than inheritance. Drop a comment below about a time when you chose what was right over what was easy. And if you want more stories about families, secrets, and the choices that define us, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Because every family has secrets, but not every family has someone brave enough to reveal them. Until next time, remember, the truth doesn't make you poor.